It's a breakthrough that oncologists could never have envisioned even just a few years ago, looking for the answers to cancer in a vial of blood. Here at the Moores Cancer Center in San Diego, ongoing clinical trials on liquid biopsies are showing to be very promising.
I feel good.
Rosina Reyes feels like a walking miracle.
I feel happy to be alive every day.
She was given 6 months to a year to live after she was diagnosed with lung cancer. That was 9 years ago.
No, I never smoke.
Oncologists removed one of her lungs after finding a golf ball-sized tumor. It's been a grueling journey of treatments, chemotherapy, radiation, and for the last 7 years, Reyes has been on the drug Tarceva.
I have a new growth in my good lung.
Reyes' cancer has been changing the way it reacts to her medication.
Okay, perfect.
Through a blood and urine liquid biopsy, her doctor learned something Reyes' tissue biopsy didn't show.
You had the tissue biopsy,
Yes.
which was negative,
Yes.
but in the blood and in the urine, we were able to detect positivity.
Dr. Haitham Hussein is leading some of the clinical trials on liquid biopsies.
We put the tubes over here in the centrifuge, we spin it.
Hundreds of blood biopsies have been performed at the UCSD Moores Cancer Center in San Diego. Similar studies have been done with urine.
As patients are receiving different forms of therapy, we believe that the cancer is not staying static. It actually changes. So making decisions on basis of the initial biopsy may only provide an incomplete picture because the cancer is changing on top of the different therapies.
Back in the 80s, one of the top scientists in the world, Bert Vogelstein at Johns Hopkins University, helped prove damaged DNA is the cause of cancer. Since almost every type of cancer sheds DNA into the bloodstream, his lab created liquid biopsy technologies to look for mutations in cancer.
This liquid biopsy potentially could test for any cancer.
Researchers can spot the DNA of a tumor, sometimes even in trace amounts in blood, saliva, urine, and other fluids.
What you see here is a tumor.
This may be used for early detection and also monitoring therapy to figure out potential reasons why drugs may stop working.
Because it's so simple, it can be repeated. So I can envision a time where we repeat the liquid biopsy every time we do scans to see if the tumor is getting better. We don't know yet whether or not we can actually eliminate the tissue biopsies. We're still seeing information in the tissue biopsy that the blood biopsy is not sensitive enough to detect.
Liquid biopsies are just one of the practical applications to advancements in genome sequencing.
The technology has reached a certain point now where we can run through millions and millions of sequences in a very small period of time with extremely high sensitivity and accuracy. And that's really what's enabled this entire market to pop up.
Illumina, based in San Diego, leads the world in making the sequencing machines which have allowed doctors and researchers to look for answers to cancer in a vial of blood.
And it's opening up doors for new therapies, new interventions. Liquid biopsy is just one of the many exciting things happening.
The promise of these tests is clear. The problem, studies are still ongoing, and they only involve small numbers of patients. There are no big definitive studies to show their full potential. For that reason, liquid biopsies are being offered to those who already have cancer. The test still has some hurdles to overcome to be used as a mainstream screening tool.
Because it turns out that there may be abnormalities that are present in the blood of normal people, and because they have a good immune system or for other reasons, they never develop cancer. So the prevention strategies, while the most exciting, are probably also the most challenging.
Several companies are working on liquid biopsy tests. One California company has been selling the test for $5,400 since last June. Insurance companies, under certain situations, cover liquid biopsies, which may transform cancer treatment. And ultimately, Reyes hopes it will improve the lives of patients like her down the road.
And I thank God for the scientists here working hard, and thanks God to them, because I have a hope.
Kaushal Patel, San Diego Union Tribune. The goal for any couple going through IVF or in vitro fertilization is having a healthy baby. And doctors say they're delivering more of them thanks to advances in genetic testing. Fertility doctors are calling new breakthroughs in PGS or pre-implantation genetic screening a game changer.
He's what I call a sucker baby, the kind that makes you want to have a million of them.
Maybe not a million, but Susie Bramson is going to try to give her son Jonas a brother or sister.
Do you remember when they were smaller? Before they had even grown on here? Yeah.
The road to having Jonas was a bit challenging at 40.
Once I met Jose, I found my match, then we definitely wanted to have a child. However, I met him sort of later on in my life, and so it just so happened that by the time, a year after we met, we were ready to have kids. It just so happened that our fertility profile was a little complicated, and so the only option, according to our fertility doctors, was to go with IVF, so that's what we did.
Before starting her IVF cycle, Bramson's fertility doctor suggested she have PGS, or pre-implantation genetic screening.
By doing PGS, or pre-implantation genetic screening, we can take a few cells from that embryo and then know what number of chromosomes that embryo has. So ruling out missing or extra chromosomes, abnormalities that would result in either a miscarriage or failed implantation.
PGS has been around for more than a decade, but studies show it's more effective now because it's more precise.
And on average, success rates is dramatically higher.
And it can better reduce the risk of having more than one baby. This is all possible because of a trifecta of changes, which have some of the top IVF specialists in San Diego excited.
I think that now we can smile a lot more, truly.
The first big change in PGS, instead of transferring a fresh embryo, doctors can now safely flash freeze the embryo and wait a month to transfer it.
If you transfer fresh embryo, the patient was just undergoing stimulation. Their hormone levels are very high, typically 10, sometimes 20 times higher than physiologic levels. So most studies indicate that attachment of the embryo to the wall of the uterus may not be as good.
Second, a biopsy on the embryo is performed when it's 5 days old instead of 3, which is safer for the embryo and also allows for more cells to be collected to check for abnormalities.
It's more reliable because now you're taking 4 to 6 cells as compared to just a single cell.
This is the lab where embryologists perform biopsies. Once the 4 to 6 cells are removed from the embryo, they're stored in a freezer and then sent to another lab in dry ice where they can get PGS. The last big change in PGS
We have an extra chromosome, whereas this chromosome was missing.
Is comprehensive screening on all 23 pairs of chromosomes. The older method only analyzed 5 chromosomes.
If you transfer an embryo without testing, you have at least 25% chance that the embryo will be abnormal. And we are talking about young, healthy, 25-year-old egg donor. If you are talking about 42-year-old female, that chance will be as high as 80% or more. So why would you want to transfer an embryo that has more than 80% chance of being abnormal?
IVF has contributed to women having twins and triplets. With PGS, it allows doctors to better select which embryo has the best potential, reducing the risk of having multiples.
I was not interested in having multiples.
Cost is a factor for many. PGS adds another $5,000 to the price tag of IVF, which is typically $15,000.
It's an expensive process to begin with, and that added expense for the level of security that you get. But not only that, it might save you money in the end because if you're only implanting embryos that are chromosomally sound, you may avoid transfers that would have occurred otherwise.
Bramson plans on adding to her family next year with the help of PGS once again.
He's just been the most amazing, amazing little baby. I couldn't have asked for a better baby.
Kaushal Patel, San Diego Union Tribune. As more women are waiting later to get married and start families, they may find themselves sitting across from a genetic counselor. It's now possible, with more accuracy and without any risk to the fetus, to test for some of the most common genetic abnormalities in older women who are pregnant.
Do you have any questions since we last talked over the phone?
No, but it's been a really long time.
Bethany Eisenberg is having her first baby at 36.
You've got the gender, so that was exciting.
And is meeting with a genetic counselor.
Basically, your results were negative or normal, which means there's a very low likelihood of Down syndrome, trisomy 18, and trisomy 13 in your pregnancy. So very reassuring.
The non-invasive prenatal test, or NIPT blood test, came out 4 years ago. A San Diego company called Genome was the first to market with its version. There are now a total of 4 major versions of the test on the market and many more in development.
So when I was waiting those 7 to 10 days for the results, I was nervous then.
NIPT can be given to women with high-risk pregnancies, which also includes women over 35, as early as 9 weeks. Eisenberg took her test at almost 10 weeks, and her genetic counselor relieved her fears.
She said, "You're having a baby girl, everything looks perfect, everything looks fine, and no need for further testing."
During pregnancy, some of the DNA from the placenta crosses into the mother's bloodstream. NIPT works by analyzing the DNA fragments for some common abnormalities, including Down syndrome, Edwards syndrome, Patel syndrome, and Turner syndrome, to name a few.
If there's something that performs almost as good as an invasive test, and it allows you to reserve the invasive tests for women who have a very high likelihood of having an abnormality, that benefits everybody. We've been in this office for a year and a half.
Dr. Andy Hall, a professor of reproductive medicine at UCSD, was part of the clinical trials to help bring the screening to women.
I think it's a huge breakthrough. I mean, the impact is immense in terms of the way it's changing the way we practice.
Before NIPT, women who were considered high risk only had the option of getting an amniocentesis or a chorionic villus sampling to know for certain if their baby had any chromosomal abnormalities.
And the advantage of amniocentesis and CVS is that it's a definitive test, but it's not risk-free.
Both of the procedures carry a risk of miscarriage.
Amniocentesis is associated with a miscarriage rate of somewhere around about 1 in 500. CVS with a miscarriage rate of about 1 in 100.
Since NIPT came out, across California, there's been a 30 to 50% drop in these invasive procedures. A study published last year by a California-based testing company, Natera, looked at more than 17,000 women. And out of the 356 women who received a test result showing their baby was at a high risk for a chromosomal condition, 22 aborted their pregnancies without getting a diagnostic test like an amniocentesis.
The tests are complicated, that they should be confined to patients with an indication, and that pre- and post-test counseling is an integral part of the testing process, and that patients should not make irrevocable decisions based on NIPT results because of the problem of false positive and false negative results.
Since NIPT is considered only a screening test, it isn't 100% accurate, but Eisenberg is satisfied with her negative results.
It does give a huge peace of mind, and I think that some women still opt to have the amnio even with this type of test because they think the amnio has been used for so much longer and it's so much better, and how can a blood test give you all these results? And I think science is amazing.
Kaushal Patel, San Diego Union Tribune.